looking for that great next read or your new favorite author? Check out Amy's Bookshelf Reviews recommendations. You won't be disappointed. Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. It is a spin-off of the website and book review site of Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast is about book reviews, a writer's muse, a book's peruse, author interviews, and literary news. Welcome to the new year, where new things may happen with this. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you for listening. Hello, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today, I have an author joining us. Would you please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Toby LeBlanc. You can connect with me through my website, www.tobyleblanc, LEBLANC, author.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Toby LeBlanc Author.
Great. Thank you. So, I read your book, Soaked. So, if you want to tell the audience a little bit about Soaked.
Sure. So, Soaked is a story about the Louisiana people, the Louisiana culture, 50 years in the future after climate change has intensified and the Gulf has moved much further inland, all the way to my hometown, which is about halfway up the bottom of the state. So, if you're thinking of Louisiana as the boot, it would be halfway up the foot. And there are 9 stories in the short story collection. They are linked in certain places, so you'll see characters reappear. But each of the 9 stories focus on a different piece of the culture and how it's impacted by climate change. So one's about food, one is about music, one is about language, government, all those different types of things. And it's just a way to think about how climate doesn't just impact the physical world that we live in, it doesn't impact just the technological world, but even impacts culture.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how it would affect individual people, but also people, their culture as a whole as well. Um, what inspired you to write stories like this? I mean, you said you live in Louisiana. I don't know much about it myself. I've only known like the culture, what I see on TV and things like that. My grandfather lived in Baton Rouge until he passed away, and he loved to cook Cajun. And even when he lived in New York, which is where I live, that was like one of the things that I just always remember. That it was like he couldn't wait till retire and go to Baton Rouge, and that's where he eventually passed away. But he passed away with all of his family with him, and he loved he bragged about like watching that I don't know, alligator or crocodile would just walk across his lawn like it was no big deal. So what inspired you to write about Louisiana and its culture?
Yeah, those alligators, we're so familiar with them. We've started calling them swamp puppies. Um, so I was born and raised in Southwest Louisiana. I'm of Cajun lineage. All of my ancestors are Cajun. My grandparents spoke French. That was their primary language and learned English later in life. So I grew up very, very immersed in Cajun culture and South Louisiana culture. It is where I spent all of my formative years. But our state is in really great peril as sea level rise continues to happen. Right now, I believe Louisiana loses a football field's worth of land about every 100 minutes. So you can literally watch it, float away into the ocean. We lose it through erosion. We even lose it through just the land is sinking because we have drilled so much oil and we've also pumped so much water out for crops that it's actually sinking and it's speeding up sea level rise and land erosion. So our soaked, I took a lot of um, literary liberties and kind of speculating on what the future would look like. But in honesty, a lot of the things that are in Soaked are already starting to happen. There are certain towns that are getting washed away. In fact, there's an entire tribe that's been living on an island for thousands of years and now has to evacuate the island because it's almost completely underwater. Um, so the story was born out of, or the book was born out of, first of all of my experiences growing up in Louisiana and thinking about if we lose a certain part of the state, even if we're not losing the whole state, what do we stand to lose culturally? How would that shift how we get to talk and speak language? Because already Louisiana French is spoken less and less as generations go by. Um, already. Our weather is changing. You know, climate's one thing, weather's another.
Yeah.
There's a lot of speculation that we should have a Category 6 hurricane, like a Category 6 classification right now, because the range on a Category 5 has gotten so big. And that absolutely will impact what happens to the state and what happens to the people. So it really was just a lot of thinking about my own culture, thinking about my home, because I can only ever call Louisiana home. I may move all the way across the world, but I'll still say Louisiana's home.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just wondering what that would be like, and putting it into stories and putting it into people that I feel like I would know. All the characters that you find in Soaked are people that you'd probably find at a Mardi Gras parade or at a crawfish boil in Louisiana. They're people that I feel like I know. So I just wanted to put that all together in one spot.
Yeah, and in reading the stories, it was like, it kind of just it was like an eye opener, really, because, I was thinking about, the climate change and how it affects, and you hear like I'm from upstate New York and I've always lived in New York, but you've always heard about like California falling into, floating off in the distance and, sinking into the Pacific. But I never really hear about that kind of stuff with Louisiana unless it's some kind of, it's I've watched, documentaries on the flooding and things like that. And, of course, the news after tragedy happened, some kind of natural disaster like Katrina. But, you don't really think of it as, oh, Louisiana's going to just disappear one day, even if it's in 1,000 years. That's kind of, um, it's a scary thought too. And then
Hmm.
I wonder, because I'm a historian and I really into like geological events. Um, so I've just I thought about, how things were formed and land got spread apart, but I didn't really think about the native people who lived in those areas or moved to areas, because one day all they had was water and the next thing they have a mountain. you know
Hmm.
but thinking about it, just kind of no longer being, um I can just imagine what people thought years ago,
Hmm.
years
Yeah,
ago.
geologically, Louisiana is probably one of the youngest states, at least the southern portion of it, because it was mostly formed by sediment from the Mississippi. But what most people don't realize is the continental shelf is not where the current coast of Louisiana is. It's about 60 miles back, or maybe not quite that far, but 30 miles back. It's between 30 and 60 miles back from where the current coastline is, which is in the book where I moved, where the Gulf moved to, because that's the continental shelf. And that's where we stand to have water come all the way into. With about 10-foot sea level rise, it would put it right at my home, my childhood home's back door, basically.
Oh, wow. It's kind of terrifying and interesting at the same time. It's strange how nature works, and there's so much we don't know about, geological events. And thinking about, when people think of climate change, they think, oh, yeah, well, my winters are getting heavier, or I'm not
Hmm.
getting um, enough snow, or we're not getting anything at all. Um, I know I live in upstate New York and we just had another snowstorm, but it's just they're few and far between now. They're not like when I was a kid where they were over my head, you know.
Right.
So
Right. And that sort of intensification is happening in Louisiana as well. We had it wasn't even a hurricane, but just I guess a low pressure system or something parked over Baton Rouge several years ago and it flooded everyone like a hurricane would. I think they got something like 2 feet of water in 12 hours or something obscene like that. We also have droughts, which I mean, we're a very, very wet state. Being so close to the Gulf means we constantly have moisture, rainstorms coming off of the Gulf, and we've had droughts in the past. In fact, the 2 winters ago, not this winter, but the one before, we had a horrible crawfish season. Crawfish is a big deal in Louisiana. It's actually our number one agricultural export and what we grow the most of and farm the most of. But we had such a drought that our seed stock of crawfish all died,
oh
and
wow.
that was kind of like our whole crawfish industry just folded for a year.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I was just recently introduced to crawfish boil. My son, he ordered crawfish from Louisiana and had it shipped up,
Oh wow.
and we had so much that we use that and do it with various seafoods, because
Hmm.
you can actually get, locally or whatever. But yeah, he once just tasted that, he's like, oh yeah, okay. I mean, this is a little kid who used to go to the creek and catch crawfish with his bare
Hmm.
hands or fish with his bare hands and then just
Hmm.
bring it home and say, hey mom, can I eat this? And, okay.
But sounds like you might have a little Cajun in them.
Yeah, I think so, somewhat.
We laugh about crawfish boils that you can't ever really get full eating them because they're so small, that they're just something to do with your hands while you talk.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
So, let's see. When you think of how much what is your writing experience? I mean, how many books have you written? Whether it's or short stories and things like that. As a writer, what kind of things have you written?
So I think a lot of my writing tends to gravitate around Louisiana just because it was such a formative place and a formative experience for me. But I've had some short pieces in Coffin Bell Journal and Barrel House Magazine. Um, and actually, a previous version of the first story from Soaked was in Deep South magazine. I tend to gravitate toward social issues a lot of times in my writing just to highlight what I see and experience in the world. I think a major part of a major theme that ends up coming up in a lot of my writing because it is a cultural piece for Cajun specifically. I explore grief a lot. That ends up coming up a lot in different pieces and different stories. Um, so I've written 2 books. I have Dark Roux, which is a novel about a Cajun family dealing with grief. Shocker. But it's about how um, that grief teaches them how to be a family again. And then I have Soaked as well that we're talking about. So I have various small pieces
Mhm.
in different places, but I have the 2 books. Those are my two bigger projects.
Mhm. No, that's wonderful. And if you had an excerpt that you wanted to share with the audience.
Sure. So I wanted to read the first few pages of one of the stories out of Dark Roux. The story is called "In the Absence of Words," and just to give you an idea of what the story is about, it's about language and it's about how Cajun language and Louisiana French is at threat, and what that can look like when somebody is the last speaker of it. So that's what the story is centered around. So again, this is "In the Absence of Words." Cajuns, along with some Creole settlers of color, made their bedding from the dried Spanish moss, so named by the indigenous people in their comparison of this cousin of the pineapple to the beards of Spanish colonizers. This stuff, which still hangs from trees all the way up to Illinois, was found throughout southern Louisiana. Many of our recovered photo archives of old Louisiana mansions pre-Hurricane Pilar have moss hanging from trees, creating tunnels of foliage leading up to corrupt plantation homes. Again, in history, we see how the keepers of the earth knew the true value of these plants, while the rich saw them only as decoration. What do you think, Mr. Michaud? Pauvre bête. Could not have said it better myself. Come back next week to Cajun Creole in the 21st podcast, a subsidiary of YouTube History USA, and find out more about the Atakapa Ishak. Until then, please subscribe and like us, but more importantly, respect and cherish. Jamil clicks off the mics and smiles at Misho. That was another good one. We can find furniture and bedding advertisers. In fact, I even know a friend in the bamboo bedding business I can call. May that sounds good, yeah. Misho says, beginning a wet, semi-staged cough. That'll be a good thing. He continues to cough out, hoping Jamil won't ask him the same thing as last week. You sure you're not ready to narrate the whole thing? If you're too worried about people understanding you, I can subtitle it. I just think it's disrespectful. Me, I told you, this French ain't like France French. It's hard to translate that. And some Cajun words don't make sense in English. And I told you, Mr. Michaud, I can pop out an algorithm in half an hour that can translate anything. Jamil's offer feels to Michaud just like everything else on this show, a warm challenge. The young man's dreadlocks shake as he nods his head in anticipation. I see how hard you work on this show. You don't need no extra work. Anyway, I don't like being too long for my friends at the hippie house. They give me mizah if I stay out. Jamil chuckles and stands. When Misho stands, he notices for the first time that Jamil is the same height as him, a short 5'6", though Jamil is wider. All right, Mr. Misho, let's get you back to your co-op. Misho feels bad lying. Jamil has done more for him than anyone since Pilar when he was 9. Even at that age, he knew that he'd be left with nothing and no one after they invented a Category 6 just for that storm. When a moment of shared remembrance of the storm happened with someone, he would pantomime the deep loss for them. But for him, it was not for the past, but of a future and lives that never got lived. Jamil makes him feel like there could be a future again. Much of his living is still in the past, in the duck capital of the world, Gaydon, Louisiana. But before the town succumbed to the Gulf, the crawfish in the ponds didn't need to be responsibly formed or organic. Crawfish eat poop, after all. People weren't piled up on top of each other like they tend to be now, and Misho was rich in nature and poor in people. His nearest neighbor, really the only person he could call a neighbor, on one of America's stubbornly unpaved roads, lived 3/4 of a mile away. Misho's parents told him that the people at the end of the road lived there for a reason, and there was no cause to disturb their self-imposed exile. He didn't quite understand what that made him, being he lived second to last on a dirt road to nowhere in 2025. The lack of TV, internet, or phone privileges added to his confusion over who was in exile. The only difference he could see was that his father at least traveled the road enough to kill the grass, while the way to the neighbors was nearly overgrown. On a hot August day that year, a young boy paddled a homemade pirogue, silent as an incoming fog, through the shallow crawfish pond next to Misho's house. Misho thought at first it must be one of the farmers. It was always a treat to see the men working from their little boats. Misho would wave as they passed back and forth until his mother would call him inside to scold him. Seeing another kid who was not one of his 6 adopted siblings was beyond special. The dark-eyed, dark-haired boy peered at him from his flat-bottomed canoe, hidden behind azalea bushes. That was as much of an invitation for conversation as Misho needed. Hi, Misho said 8 times. It started out as a failed whisper and ended as a shout. His feet brought him closer and closer, though he knew they shouldn't. His mother would hear and see, but he didn't care. The stranger, dressed in clothes recycled several times, startled with each hi. On the 8th one, it was the new kid, not his mother, who scolded him. Tais-toi! Michaud smiled widely at the sound of a voice he hadn't heard before, and even wider to hear something other than English. Pooh-yah, you talk a lot. Hi, I'm Misha. I'm adopted. I have six brothers and sisters. What's your name? How many brothers and sisters do you have? The youth lowered his eyes and looked back across the pond, squinting toward an unknown sight. He looked back at Misha. My daddy, he thinks I'm fishing behind my house. I have to go. Because his mother never called him that day, he could watch the new boy paddle away between the orange rings of crawfish traps until he couldn't see him any longer. Misha replays that 50-year-old memory several more times over the week. His co-op roommates check on him as he tends to stare out of the window longer than usual. They likely believe he is thinking about the show and his time with Jamil, the only thing he's ever spoken about for more than 3 seconds. At bedtime, he holds his cup of tea halfway to his mouth, caught between the present and the past. Sometimes the roommates touch his shoulder to rouse him, but when Jamil arrives, hearkening the new episode to be recorded, Misha finds himself solidly in the present.
Wow, it's very, very powerful. And it's pretty amazing too. Wow. I think it's it's I find it odd how, but I know it happens with a lot of people, how language changes over the years, and you know, even someone a culture's own version of their own language, it slowly fades as generations, and they I think that, it shouldn't be lost, because it's a part of who people are you know, as a whole, as they have been since, the beginning of whatever. And having these being able, I feel it's like where, people pass down stories to generation, they should pass it down with their language. And of course, stories change as they, you know, get told more and more. And I think we have the um, ability where it's good that we can actually write down the stories, but still that doesn't emphasize on, how we talk or communicate. I'm just one of those people that I'm not. I don't use text shorthand. I type it all
hmm
out.
hmm
Just because it's like, okay, I don't know what that means. Uh, some things I do, and I'm like, okay, I just like to be clear on what I am trying to say.
Yeah, the language is something that I I don't think I really appreciated how much my world was made by language until I got to be an adult and realized there were some words that in Louisiana French captured my understanding of something better than an English word. And a lot of times there was no English equivalent, or at least if there was an equivalent, it never captured all of the feeling behind it or
Right.
all of the concepts.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing I am appreciative of that while Louisiana French is disappearing at an alarming rate, there's still a lot of people working very hard to keep it alive. And the wonderful thing that I love to watch is one of the places that the language is kept alive the most is in the music. Um, Louisiana French is still very alive inside of Cajun and Creole music, Zydeco. Um, and yeah, that's where you'll see it the most. I mean, and it sounds good because it's put to a beat, so it makes
Yeah,
it everybody can get along with that whenever there's music involved. So I do appreciate that there's so many people working really hard to keep it alive.
that is good. And yeah, music is one of those things that um, when you hear it and you enjoy it, it's something that kind of stays with you, or it brings you back to a memory of when you first heard that. I know even dementia patients, when they're played music that they're familiar with, it's something that can, it at least they feel something with the song, even if
hmm
they can't, talk about it. My dad has dementia. He's in a facility, and when they're always trying to find ways to keep him from being agitated, I tell him to play the kind of music that he likes, Elvis, you know, and of, you know, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, all the things that
Good
he,
stuff.
yeah. Um, and then I tell him every once in a while throw in a Frank Sinatra because that's like mine. So
Hmm.
when they do that, it's like he has that little bit of memory for the both of us. But I like that. I love songs that also tell a story. And a lot of times when you're playing or you're singing, um, you get that a lot in, like you said, the Cajun and the Creole music. Um, Jamaicans are similar, and Mexicans are also similar, and
Hmm.
they tell a story, whether it's good or bad, but just being able to tell a story. And
Hmm.
I think that is so important because I think any way you can tell a story, and if you have that talent to do that, um, I was, like I said, I read those stories in Soaked, and I went back and I read them a second time before I wrote my review, and
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to. That doesn't happen a lot. Usually, I read a book and I take notes. Sometimes, if it's it feels very like powerful, and I can feel the passion and everything that is um, you behind that, behind the pen, behind the words. And then those are the kind of books that I'll be like, okay, I have to read this again because I love it. The
Oh,
kind of it's the books that will stay on your bookshelf because you will go back to them. It's like watching an old movie or something that you absolutely love. You just keep going back to the same books and things like that because you just love what they say. So I
oh,
am very impressed with your writing, and um, I think you've hit on something that I've never had experience with all my writing. So and my with reading, over since 2014, I've been doing reviews, and I've never read anything like this at all. So I must say that this is pretty amazing. Um,
well, thank you. And, I'm so happy to hear that you liked it enough to read it twice. That's wow, that's awesome to hear.
yeah, and I can't wait to read the next one now.
I'm
That,
working on it. I'm working on it.
yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. I'm very impressed with your writing, and I mean, as an author and a person who reads like millions of books and everything, like I said, that is quite quite unique. So
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. I just yeah, and just uh a quick question. I ask this of my guests sometimes. If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. First word that comes to mind is curious. Um, I love to explore. I live, thankfully, in a state of wonder a lot. So I'm very curious. I want to learn about people. I want to learn about the world. I want to learn about just about everything. I'm a very curious person. Um, I I'm also a very stable person, and that is a word other people have used for me that I just kind of I find a rhythm and I stay in it. And for better or for worse, sometimes somebody may say that that's a good thing about me. Other people may say that's a bad thing about me. But I am I guess, a very stable, curious person. Um, but I'm also, I think I also see myself as hopeful. I'm a very hopeful person. I think there's a lot of things in this world to be scared of, and I think there are a lot of we're at several inflection points in our existence, and I always look for where we can make things better, and I always look for where we can hold on to things that work well. So I try to stay in a hopeful space. So I'm curious, stable, and hopeful would be my
That's
three.
great. I mean, sounds like you are also a lifelong learner, which that's me. I think if you stop learning, you stop being. That's just how I feel.
I agree.
I
I agree.
really thank you so much for being on my show. And I hope after your next book, you wouldn't mind coming again and
I'd love
doing
to.
great. So I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to finish up here. If you wish for you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Stay safe and be well. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. If you are looking to be on the podcast or looking for a book review, you can go to amysbookshelfreviews.com and look for the appropriate navigational menu. Again, thank you all for listening and being a supporter of this podcast and of the Amy's Bookshelf Reviews professional reviewers of books and audiobooks. Thank you all. Be safe and be well.